capture.
Hello, and welcome to the New Rochelle Bar Association Oral History Project. My name is Greg Varian, and I welcome Robert Ollman, Bob Ollman to most of us, to be interviewed for this program. The date is September 29th, 2021, and we are both participating in the recording of this archive. I've agreed to and signed the interviewer's release dated September 29th, 2021, and Robert Ollman has agreed to and signed the interviewee release. With the formalities completed, let's begin the interview.
Be my pleasure. And I just tell you, I looked at the release, and since I'm at my law office, I had 3 attorneys review it, and they've all approved it, so we're ready to go.
I should have waited for that clearance, Bob. Bob, what's your background?
Well,
Growing up, education?
I was a kid in growing up in New Rochelle, but I came to New Rochelle for a very interesting reason. When I was about 12 years old, I asked my mother for a motorcycle jacket, and she got very upset about that. I had already had peg pants, ducktail haircut, and but I needed a motorcycle jacket, so she said it's time to move. So we moved to New Rochelle, and I was blessed. We came up in 1957. I remember that was the year of Sputnik, and I went to Isaac Young Junior High School. I went to New Rochelle High School, graduated in '62, and then I went to Colgate University, where I bumped into organic chemistry. And since I couldn't do well in organic chemistry, I figured the only doctorate I was going to get would be a Juris Doctor, not a medical doctor, and that prompted me to go to law school. So I went to GW Law School in Washington, D.C., and but I wasn't really sure that I wanted to practice law. So I had the opportunity to teach at New Rochelle High School, and for 2 years I taught at New Rochelle High School, and then woke up and said, wait a second, I passed the bar, I'm trained as an attorney, and so then I started the practice of law.
Just as an aside, for our centennial project, we'll be putting together a picture board, and I would hope you have some pictures of you as a youngie attending Albert Leonard. I think that would.
I do.
Then please go back and look at the scrapbooks
crew cut and big ears.
We want those pictures, Bob. So we know how you got started in the law, but what was actually the way you got started? A law firm, the courts?
Yeah, no, good question. Here's what happened. I got a telephone number, and I got an escrow book. And I associated with Dave Klibanow, who was an old-timer. You may remember him in New Rochelle. And he had offices at 271 North Avenue.
The K Building, Pershing Square Building.
Famous K Building.
All of us in New Rochelle.
One time or another. And he was, Maxwell Sharrett was with him, and Max was the corporation counsel. And I had a side office off of David's conference room, which used to be, I found out, the family court for Westchester County. So I had this cavernous conference room, a little office to practice in, and I started to practice law. And as anyone would do, I figured, well, how am I going to make a living? So, because the study of law and the practice of law are unrelated. And so I went up to I took court assignments. I'll never forget going up for the first time. It was a shoplifting out of Macy's, and all of a sudden, I ran into an ADA who said, your guy has a clean record. I'll give you an ACD. And I said, an ACD? Explain to me what an ACD is, and maybe I'll take it. And that was my baptism into the practice of law.
And from there, we know law firms that had your name. So tell us how you proceeded in the practice of law here in New Rochelle.
I was very fortunate through the Bar Association, which was very important. I met Barry Marcus, and I met John Comer, and I met many other people. And I first was with Howard Raccoon, another individual practitioner, a lovely gentleman. and I learned a lot of real estate from him and how to think through legal problems. And then we had an association with Howard Raccoon, Barry Marcus, myself, and John Comer, and then that morphed into Marcus, Ollman, and Comer, and I had a wonderful run. That was probably in 1980, and we went until about 2014. Barry Marcus, a gentleman, very fine attorney, John Comer, who's still my attorney, my good friend and partner, and that was Comer, Bave, and Ollman that started in about 2014. Barry had retired, and Barry had done a lot of estate work, and so now Patty Bave is my partner, and Patty has expertise in estate planning and elder law, and so she has been a partner since 2014.
Now, that long period of Marcus, Ollman, and Comer, you were in a building that you guys, it was your building, right, across from Heafy Cadillac, I think it was at the time, on Post Road.
You have a good memory. I remember we bought the building and we established Barrister Realty, and we paid rent to ourselves. And Barry and I remember when we were first there was a loading dock. I remember he and I were shoveling snow from the front of the building, and we were there for a long time. Yeah, 72 East Main Street, great location.
Tell us about how you got involved with the North Shore Bar Association.
Well, I've always been active in the bar since I was a young guy, and I started probably around 1971, and it led to a lot of very good friendships, like that led to the partnership, and I was a board member, and then I ultimately, in I think it was 1979, 79 and 80, became the president. The bar was a little different back then. We had meetings, usually dinner meetings, I should say, dinner meetings which allowed you to segue to the bar, and it was usually either a local restaurant like Giovanni's, which became Giuliano's, and the Elks Club, and we were at various places, but you usually...
And what about Serendipity, right next to the K building?
That was Jim Austin.
That was Jim Austin, and that was a meeting spot for the local lawyers for a while.
I probably met you there many times.
I think we did.
I think we closed it down a few times. Yeah, that's the memory of it. But we had smaller meetings, and I always remember that if we had 15, 20 members at a time, we also would have 5 or 6 guys from the title company, men and women who were representatives of the title company. And we didn't really have CLEs at the time. What we did have, though, was a lot of guest lecturers would come. And I also remember that each Christmas time, we would have these huge parties, usually at Glen Island Casino. And a memory of Ed Freeman used to be the dinner chairman in perpetuity. Remember Ed? And he would run these dinners, and we would have all of the judges in the 9th District come down, and there'd be a double dais. And then Judge Serrato, who preceded Judge Donovan doing this, would roast everyone, and it was just a fun evening. But everyone from the surrogate court was down, all the clerks. It was a very, very...
We had the judges throughout Westchester, as I recall.
All the judges.
It was the place for all lawyers in the county to come to.
The place to be. And when I was also president, I remember Equitable Distribution came in July of 1980. And I remember at the time, Justice Ruskin, who had been the mayor of New Rochelle, and he and his law secretary, Eddie Stork, came down, and they tried to introduce us to Equitable Distribution. It was the first time we were hearing about it, and then that led to the O'Brien case, and the rest is history. It changed the dynamics of the practice of law. Yeah, that was...
You were our city court judge for a while, were you not?
I was honored to be. I love the opportunity. Mayor Idoni had asked me to sit as an acting judge in the mid-90s, And I took up that opportunity, and I loved it. It was a great experience because by then I had had trial experience both in criminal matters, because my practice had initially, usually in the early stages, was criminal, but then I did a lot of litigation, not only criminal, but civil litigation. So when matters were on the calendar, the other acting judges were very happy for me to take it and conduct the trial, which I did. I enjoyed that. We had some fun trials. But I was in the city court in 95, had the opportunity to stay on. But I must tell you, at that time in my career, I was trying some heavy cases and being in White Plains a lot. And I had 2 kids in college, so the prospect of just being in the hierarchy of the judgeship didn't really appeal to me. I liked my independence, and so I stayed in private practice and did not take the mayor up on extending my term, and that was the time that Gail Rice she succeeded me. I had taken the place of Ken Rudolph, who everyone in New Rochelle knows, and Ken Rudolph said, "Bob, I'm giving you the most important thing you need in the New Rochelle City Court." And I said, "Judge, what's that?" "The key to the men's room." He said, I remember that night. And he's a great guy, still is. And I enjoyed being on the bench. Had some funny instances on the bench. I remember one of our local attorneys on an assigned case, who shall go nameless, the witness at the time, it was a felony hearing, pointed to the defendant and said, "The guy in the red sweater, the bald-headed guy in the red sweater," and defense counsel jumped up and said, I object. My client is not bald, he's follically deprived." and those were the days we had some fun. But I very much enjoyed it, and I would have loved to have continued or yet at a later date reappointed, but I kept a promise to my wife. And when my youngest daughter in 98 got out of the New Rochelle High School, we moved into the city, so jurisdictionally I was no longer a resident up here to sit on the bench. But the New Rochelle City Court had some real celebrities, real personalities.
I want to pick up on that, but before I do, I want to point out to our audience that Warren Hagginson, who is the mover, the person who developed this whole centennial interview process and has executed on it and has done just a magnificent job. I mean, we would not be here today. The other programs would not have occurred without Warren. And the reason I'm interrupting to introduce Warren to our audience is that when the roles are reversed and you're interviewing me, I want him to use that follically, because I think that's an important
and
distinction.
You just triggered in my mind something very important. First, all accolades to Warren for putting these oral history together. It's superb. I think it's a great idea. But also, when I was talking about the bar, one thing I wanted to mention, I mentioned we didn't have a lot of CLEs, but subsequent to my tenure on the bar, I think, and I'll stand corrected, I think Barbara Lerman, and I think you, Mr. Varian, I think you were president right after Barbara, she started the CLEs, and then you continued it and expanded it. And I've said to many people, there's nothing more tectonic or volatile than giving attorneys free CLEs and food. It's standing room only.
I'm not sure which goes first, the food or the CLEs.
So when I used to have maybe 15, 20 members at a regular monthly meeting, now you have standing room only, and people show up.
Well, with all due respect to you and the people that preceded Barbara in the role of president of the Bar Association, the fact is it wasn't mandatory until just before Barbara started. And when it went into effect, the only way people could get the credits was through law schools and paying an arm and a leg. And the idea of, wait a minute, let's get sponsors, let's get the title companies and the banks to sponsor these events so we can make it part of our membership free CLEs. And that's what expanded the organization tremendously.
Right. On a serious note, you could, over a 2-year period, if you attend the meetings, get the credits that you need, including ethics and diversity, and have a good time in doing it and being with a lot of your colleagues. It's a great, great initiative, and Barbara, you get credit for that.
Back to your time, your experiences. You've talked about a lot of personalities that, quite frankly, until today, I just hadn't thought of in recent years. Are there any other personalities, maybe an anecdote that you can leave us with before we ask you about how things have changed? Something that would really point out to us how much things have changed in terms of the people that were in power and placed in the city.
When I started to practice, there was a lovely gentleman who was the judge in the city court, too, as a matter of fact, Ben Mermelstein. Called him Gentle Ben, because you had a conference with him and you put your cards on the table, explain the circumstance. Many times he would accommodate your request on a plea bargain. And then there was Richard Baltimore. We called him Lord Baltimore because he was very imperious. But Ben, Gentle Ben, was a sweetheart of a guy. I remember once I was vigorously, as an early attorney, was representing a tenant, a landlord tenant, and was getting very animated and was asking for counsel fees. And Ben said, Mr. Ollman, please approach the bench. And he said, Bob, he said, calm down, calm down. He said, one day when your practice is taken off, you're going to be representing landlords, so don't get too animated here with the counsel fee aspect.
Can I interrupt one question? You remember Chris Murphy?
Oh, I remember Chris Murphy, but I don't know if we want to.
No, okay.
Yeah, Chris Murphy was great. If you had well, let's not go.
Okay.
No, he
sorry.
was a distinguished judge. A funny story. The story goes, I didn't think about this, that someone at a dinner approached Chris Murphy. For those who are seeing this for the first time, who's city court judge, and said to him, hey, judge, I got a ticket. Can you help me with it? And the judge, having had a few cocktails, said, help you with it? He said, I know the court clerk. I can take care of this for you.
Sorry to interrupt. I thought that might be
I don't know if we're going to edit that out or not, but in finishing, Bob, what?
Well, no,
has,
I have to tell you another
okay.
Ben Mermelstein. I came in one day and the judge put a proceeding down for like 2 weeks, and I said, Judge, I'm getting married. I'm not going to be here. I'll be on a honeymoon. The judge said, Stallman, approach the bench. He said, Bob, lie down. Let the feeling go away. And then one story I remember about Judge Baltimore. I became a hero for tackling a defendant that had pushed the assistant district attorney in court away and started a run out of the old courthouse at 90 Beaufort Place. And I allegedly tackled him. But the fact of the matter is, I didn't tackle him. I knew that Judge Baltimore was packing a revolver, and I was just afraid he was going to stand up and take a few shots. So I ducked, and I was standing there with Napoleon Holmes, who was from the Community Action Agency, another blast from the past, and the kid tripped on me, slammed into the wall, fell down, and Jimmy Knoll, the court officer at the time, I don't know if you remember him, apprehended him and cuffed him, and I was a hero for the day. But the one other person I want to really mention, and this was the local color, was Constantine Conios, the court stenographer, beloved by all the attorneys because he's a very spiritual guy. Conios was a great guy, and I used to play a game with him when we were having hearings. And in those days, when you had a hearing in the afternoon, you could shoot off a cannon and no one was around. It was just in the morning, and there was just like one judge and 2 acting city judges. Now I believe there are 3. I'll stand corrected on that.
Full time.
And Conios was a sweet guy, and I used to try and use words to stump him. And like if we had a felony hearing and someone had a scar, and I'd say, was that cicatrix noticeable? And Mr. Conios would put up his hand slowly and say, excuse me, Mr. Ollman, could you please spell that? And that was the game we played.
any parting advice to some of the younger attorneys, which is probably all of them, who may view this video?
Well, thank you. Yeah, thanks, Greg. Thanks, Greg. Wait till I question you. I think I'm going to cross-examine you, not question you. I've been practicing now, this is 50 years. 50 years. And if I had to say anything, I would tell attorneys to be active in the bar. You meet a lot of friends. I'd say keep your nose clean. Just think about, at the time, think about when you're driving away from an incident, what you should have done, not what you may have done emotionally. Don't mess with your escrow account, that's for sure. And the only other thing I could think of is use sunscreen. That's it. Ollman out.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you very much for
Thank you,
great,
guys.
great interview.